everyone, and welcome to our podcast on why does efficacy matter? I am your host, Andrew Berkuta. I'm the COO and Chief of Cyber Services at Goliath Cybersecurity Group. With me are guests Ronen, I'll get this, Ahdut, and head of Cynet CyOPS at Cynet. Also, and Rebecca, I'm going to be merciful here. Rebecca Rakoski, got that. She is a cyber attorney with Expan Law Partners, and last but not least, Angelo Gongo, who is the head of executive services with Goliath Cybersecurity Group. Also, he's my co-host in a podcast called Cyber Insanity. So with that, I think we have a very good panel here for you today. So let's kind of go through at a first look at cyber events, right? So this is where it all starts, is how does a cyber event parse out, and let's take a viewpoint of a timeline, a cyber timeline. So there's an event which is the focal point, of course. But then following the event, or the right of bang, is some activity that happens, and we'll get into that. But often there's little focus of left of bang, which is the preparation, the policies, the regulation, the actions which contribute to the event itself. So in postmortems, it's often contested in questions raised about the degree of efficacy of the cybersecurity posture of the company. So definitions and questions are and impacts are measured at that point. But let's kind of back up here and take a look at this. So what does it mean to detect a threat and then act and then measure effectiveness? And so I want to pick on Ronen on this one, because we talk about dwell time. We also talk about places that we reference, things like MITRE, for example, on evaluations. How does that play out from a manufacturing standpoint?
Okay, thank you. A great question. So for us, we will create and enable those detections and make sure that we will be there to provide the visibility and to make sure that any step of an attack will be detected in order to reduce any dwell time and effectively reduce the impact. Now, we can create those detections and we can create a ton of visibility, but it could also create a lot of noise. And one of the best ways for us and for the industry to verify our tools and our capabilities and the technology is like what you mentioned, MITRE Ingenuity, which is a test that is there to basically not just go on the compliance side, or are you compliant with the EDR or XDR? It's basically focuses around the efficacy. How do you detect, how do you prevent, and how do you respond to those events, alerts, incidents, and how do you basically reduce the dwell time and impact? And they do not just test a single scenario, they test what they call the MITRE attack framework, specific TTPs, techniques, and tactics that are used in real-world scenarios by adversaries, and they test our technology against it to see how we, as a manufacturer or the vendor that supplies the technology, are working against it, and basically allow us to test our efficacy in a real world scenario as much as can be real world in this testing.
So there's a lot of countermeasure resiliency that's built into, and obviously Cynet has that resiliency built in, and you scored, I think, the highest in the MITRE evaluation. So you won't brag about it, but I can certainly say it. And that's for a few years now, because your positioning was the countermeasures have to be working in concert with each other to be able to provide this efficacy, I think. Rebecca, let's flip the dialogue a little bit, because now we're talking about the right of bang, right? After something happens, you're engaged as a cyber attorney. Somebody says, "Oh my goodness, Rebecca, we're we're locked up, we had a breach, we don't know if we had a breach, maybe we do. You're looking at it at the incident response time and saying, okay, I'm calling the shots. I have a team. We're putting this into place. But then there's some penalties in here. There's penalties or impacts for the incident depth and the duration, that dwell time. Speak to how early actions can save money and reputation here, because I don't think people realize, or they may realize and go, well, it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah, I think that this is not going to happen to me. Ship has sailed. If that's your philosophy, you may as well just you're chumming the water with your data. Good luck with that, because you're getting hit. There's no question in my mind. But from my perspective, what I would call the proactive versus the reactive measures, right? So the proactive measures are going to reduce put you in a defensible position. So I can't stop a breach from happening for my clients. I tell them all the time, if I could wrap you in bubble wrap and put you on the top of a mountain and not let you connect to the internet at all, now you're protected 100. You have 100% security, except from bears and maybe snakes, which I really hate. But other than that, if you're going to interact with the world, you're exposing yourself to some risk. Depending on the data, that's going to change that risk profile. But with the proactive measures, the more proactive measures somebody puts in place, the shorter the dwell time, the better, right? All of that leads to creating this defensible position. So when we go to court, they can say, well, they should have done this. And I'm like, oh, they did. Oh, well, they should have done that. Oh, they were. They did that too. And they were only in there for a short period of time, and right. And so all of those are weapons at my disposal, because what this really comes down to is reasonableness, right? That's what the law is driving at. Were your actions reasonable, given the data that you are collecting, what how long you're holding it, what your processing activities are, your threat vectors, were you acting reasonable under that situation? And the more proactive measures that you have, the more reasonable you are. Now, that doesn't mean small companies are spending what some large bank is spending, right? It has to be reasonable for you, but it also has to be reasonable vis-a-vis the data. And so that's what's really important. That's what I'm looking for in terms of when I go back to before bang, right? I'm looking to see what were you doing, so that now post I can say to a court, hopefully in a motion to dismiss, these are not the droids you're looking for, keep moving on, right? Or to an attorney general's office, right?
Right.
Nothing to see here, because they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, and sometimes bad things happen. At the end of the day, and I think I've said this to you before, Andrew, this is the only area where crime victims become defendants in lawsuits, right? You are the victim of a crime, somebody broke into your house, and now you have to defend why you couldn't keep them out. And it's well, because they wanted to come in. And so, right, it gets very difficult, and it's complicated, very complicated. But the more you give me on the back end, the more I have to defend it in court.
Well, now I have to look at the third leg of this stool, right? Is where the rubber meets the road. Angelo, I'm going to pick on you here. So how is the implementation of this, right? You want to promote and not deter efficacy of a solution. Where's the practical approach of this?
Well, first off, let's start with the fact that there's that old adage of quick, good, and cheap. Pick two. It's difficult. And when we're looking at some of these items and trying to integrate these things in here, there are many different things we need to take into account. And when I say we, I'm talking about whomever I'm protecting as a company and my fellow people who are working with me. The reality is behind all this is we encounter a number of different issues. How do we make it quicker? How do we automate it? Can we consolidate things? A lot of times we have tool sprawl, which creates an issue in and of itself, because now we have multiple consoles, which we now need to address. I've seen the effects of that, and the effects of multiple consoles and the effects of log overload lead to issues and problems. How do you address that in a practical manner, which allows you to get the meat and potatoes that you need to react and do something with? That's what people want. You know, a board or an executive staff want me to say, we are safe. They don't really care about any of the acronyms I bring to matter. And the reality is when you come back down to that is, how are you safe? Well, you need to do this, this, and this. And this is the risk that is presented if you don't do X, Y, and Z. If we can't get to a point of agreement at that point, it's very hard to go any further. But having said that, I spend a lot of my time integrating into what the company does to make money. What is their real purpose? How do they do it? And what things from that need to be protected? And if I can isolate the things that they need to protect, the transfers, the data, et cetera, I can build a program that wraps around that. Now it comes down to procedural adherence to how that goes. And if we can get all those things in line, we have the right product or service at the right spot, we can effectively reduce, in the right spot and set correctly. That's another thing that sometimes gets overlooked. You know, you can put whatever you want anywhere. If it doesn't have any, it's not looking at anything, it doesn't do much for you. So the reality is, if you could do all three of those things, you could deliver a product, a solution that gives you pretty high efficiency and efficacy, but there's always the balance. You always got to wait between what you're paying for and what you're getting in the end.